Sigourney Weaver's journey to becoming one of the most important figures in science fiction history did not begin with fame, confidence, or Hollywood dreams. She was born on October 8, 1949, as Susan Alexander Weaver, into a family that already carried the weight of fame. Her father, Pat Weaver, was a powerful television executive who helped create legendary shows like The Today Show and The Tonight Show, while her mother, Elizabeth Inglis, was an actress who appeared in Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps. Despite growing up surrounded by famous names and industry success, Sigourney often felt invisible. Her parents were busy building careers, and she later described her childhood as lonely, saying she felt like a small girl in a big house with no one listening. This early sense of being unseen deeply shaped her personality. Instead of relying on her family's influence, she chose to walk her own path. She attended Stanford University to study English literature, not acting, because she believed becoming an actress was unrealistic and even a little foolish. Her college life was unusual and creative. She lived in a treehouse, played the flute, dressed in costumes for fun, and stayed far from the polished Hollywood image people expected. It wasn't until she traveled to Israel after graduation and worked on a farm that she realized how much she missed storytelling and performing. That realization changed everything and pushed her toward Yale School of Drama, one of the most competitive acting schools in the world, where her real struggle began. Yale was not kind to Sigourney Weaver. Surrounded by classmates like Meryl Streep, who constantly received praise in leading roles, Sigourney was often overlooked and cast as older women despite being in her early 20s. One professor even told her directly that she had no talent and should quit acting altogether. These words could have ended her career before it began, but instead they fueled her determination. Long before Yale, Sigourney had already learned how to reshape herself to survive. At the age of 14, she changed her name after reading The Great Gatsby, choosing Sigourney because it felt stronger and more unique than Susan. She was already very tall, nearly 6 feet by her teenage years, and had been teased for it, called names like Giant Spider. Changing her name gave her confidence and control over her identity. At Yale, she found creative freedom through experimental theater, especially while working with playwright Christopher Durang. Their strange, bold productions shocked audiences and teachers alike. In one play, she portrayed bizarre characters that mixed humor, sadness, and absurdity. Critics were confused, professors were angry, and she even failed her final evaluation at Yale. But those same risky performances caught the attention of theater agents. What Yale rejected, the real world embraced. This period taught Sigourney a lesson she would carry for life. Following rules does not always lead to greatness, but taking risks sometimes does. Before Alien, Sigourney Weaver was almost invisible in film. Her first movie appearance was a 6-second role in Annie Hall, where she had no lines and stood silently in the background. She was paid $50, which she joked barely covered a sandwich. Yet even this tiny role helped her later, because casting director Juliet Taylor remembered her face. When Alien began casting, no one imagined the lead character, Ripley, would be a woman. The original script used male pronouns, and studio executives believed audiences would never accept a woman fighting monsters in space. Big names like Meryl Streep and Glenn Close were considered, but Sigourney Weaver, an unknown actress, walked in and changed everything. Director Ridley Scott saw something different in her: calm strength, intelligence, and presence. At just 29 years old, she was cast in a role that would redefine science fiction. She was paid only $35,000, while her male co-star John Hurt earned far more, showing how little the studio believed in her importance. Yet, when Alien was released in 1979, audiences were shocked. Ripley was not weak, romantic, or helpless. She was practical, brave, and smart. When male characters died, Ripley survived. She didn't scream to be saved. She fought back. In that moment, Sigourney Weaver didn't just become a star. She changed how women were seen in action film forever. The success of Alien led to Aliens in 1986, which took Ripley's character even further. This time, she wasn't just surviving. She was leading soldiers into battle. Sigourney trained hard, worked with military advisors, and brought emotional depth to a character who could easily have become one-dimensional. Her performance was so powerful that she received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, something almost unheard of for a science fiction film at the time. Hollywood rarely respected the genre, and many believed she deserved to win, but the Oscar went to Marlee Matlin instead. Even so, the nomination itself was groundbreaking. It proved that science fiction could carry serious performances and emotional weight. Around this time, Sigourney achieved something no actor had ever done before, winning 2 Golden Globe acting awards in one night for Gorillas in the Mist and Working Girl. These roles showed her range. In one, she became a dedicated scientist, risking her life to protect gorillas. In the other, she played a sharp, ruthless executive. Despite this success, Sigourney refused to be trapped by one image. She turned down major roles in films like Total Recall and The Silence of the Lambs because she did not want to repeat herself. She chose complex, challenging roles instead, proving she valued art over easy money. Her return in Alien 3 was one of the most difficult experiences of her career. The film began with bold ideas, including a religious monastery setting, but studio fear destroyed those plans. Scripts were thrown out, rewritten, and changed repeatedly. When David Fincher, a young director at the time, was brought in, he was constantly overruled by executives. Sigourney herself faced physical and emotional struggles. She shaved her head to make Ripley look stripped of identity and strength, but studio executives wanted her to wear a wig because they worried she wouldn't look attractive. She refused. For Sigourney, Ripley was not meant to be pleasing. She was meant to survive. The set was chaotic, and the pressure was exhausting. Despite believing in Fincher's vision, the studio interference drained her love for the franchise. Ripley's death in Alien 3 was meant to be meaningful, a final sacrifice, but even that moment was changed by executives chasing spectacle. When the film was released, it disappointed many fans, but over time it gained respect for its dark themes and emotional honesty. In Alien Resurrection, Sigourney returned as a clone, Ripley 8, no longer fully human. This version was stronger, stranger, and deeply unsettling. One of the film's most disturbing scenes showed failed Ripley clones begging for death, a moment that highlighted the horror of scientific control and identity loss. Though critics mocked the film's odd tone, Sigourney defended it as bold and different. One famous scene, where she throws a basketball backward into a hoop, became legendary because she actually did it on the first try, refusing CGI help. After this film, Sigourney firmly closed the door on the franchise. She refused Alien vs. Predator, calling it meaningless and disrespectful to Ripley's legacy. She believed the character deserved dignity, not endless sequels. Even after leaving Alien, Sigourney Weaver continued to surprise audiences. She voiced Ripley in the video game Alien Isolation, praised for capturing the fear and tension of the original film. She later stunned viewers by playing a teenage Gnostics girl in Avatar, The Way of Water at age 61, using pure performance rather than technology to convey youth. Beyond acting, she built a quiet, stable life, married for over 40 years, raising a daughter, and staying far from Hollywood drama. Today, at 75, Sigourney Weaver's truth is clear. Not a single shocking secret, but a lifetime of resistance against limitation. She fought studios, ignored stereotypes, refused easy money, and reshaped what strength looks like on screen. Her legacy is not just Alien. It is courage, integrity, and the power of choosing your own story. As Sigourney Weaver grew older, her view of Alien and Hollywood became clearer and more honest, and she stopped protecting the industry with polite silence. In interviews over the years, especially as she entered her 70s, she openly admitted that the Alien films were never just about monsters or science fiction, but about power, control, and fear, especially fear of women who refused to stay quiet. She explained that Ripley frightened studios not because she was unrealistic, but because she was too real. Ripley did not rely on romance, beauty, or approval. She survived by thinking clearly under pressure, questioning authority, and refusing to follow orders that did not make sense. Weaver revealed that many executives were uncomfortable with this image. Even after the films became successful, they wanted Ripley softened, sexualized, or turned into a simple action figure. And when Weaver resisted, she was labeled difficult, a word she later said was often used to silence women who asked for creative respect. Looking back, she admitted that Alien 3 broke something inside her, not because of the shaved head or the dark story, but because it showed her how little studios trusted artists when money was at risk. She described watching entire sets destroyed, scripts thrown away, and meaningful ideas erased overnight, all because executives were afraid audiences would not understand something different. For Weaver, this was the moment she realized Hollywood was no longer about courage or imagination, but about playing safe, even if it meant ruining something special. She also spoke about the emotional cost of carrying Ripley for so many years. Weaver said Ripley was not a role she could turn off at the end of the day. Playing a woman who constantly faced death, loss, and isolation took a psychological toll, especially during Aliens and Alien 3. She revealed that Ripley's grief over Newt mirrored her own fears about loss, aging, and identity in an industry obsessed with youth. This is why she insisted Ripley die in Alien 3. To Weaver, keeping Ripley alive forever would have been dishonest. She believed heroes should be allowed to end, to rest, and to remain meaningful rather than becoming hollow symbols used to sell tickets. This belief directly caused her to walk away from millions of dollars. When studios approached her about future sequels, crossovers, and reboots, she refused, even as friends warned her she was throwing away easy money. Weaver later said that saying no was the most powerful decision she ever made. It protected Ripley's legacy and protected her own mental health. She did not want to spend the rest of her life repeating a character that no longer had something truthful to say. As audiences grew older, many began to understand what Sigourney Weaver had been fighting for all along. Younger filmmakers and critics started to reevaluate the Alien series, especially Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, seeing themes of bodily control, corporate cruelty, and forced identity that felt more relevant than ever. Weaver acknowledged this shift with quiet satisfaction. She said she did not need revenge or apologies, only understanding. In her 70s, she spoke warmly about fans who told her Ripley helped them feel strong during difficult times, especially women who grew up feeling ignored, underestimated, or judged for not fitting traditional roles. Weaver admitted that she never set out to become a feminist icon, but she accepted the title because Ripley showed strength without explanation. She did not lecture. She did not ask permission. She simply survived. That, Weaver said, was the real truth behind Alien. Not the creature, not the shock scenes, but the idea that fear loses its power when you face it calmly and refuse to obey it. Today, Sigourney Weaver's legacy stands untouched by trends or franchises. She never chased relevance, yet relevance followed her. She proved that science fiction could be serious, that women could lead without compromise, and that walking away can sometimes be braver than staying. At 75, her truth is no longer hidden in interviews or behind studio decisions. It is clear in the choices she made, the roles she refused, and the character she protected. Alien did not make Sigourney Weaver immortal. Her integrity did. And long after the xenomorph fades into cinema history, Ripley will remain standing. Not because she fought the monster, but because she refused to become one as time passed. Sigourney Weaver also began speaking more honestly about how Alien shaped the way Hollywood treated women in powerful roles, and her words carried more weight because she had lived through every phase of that change. She explained that before Ripley, female characters in science fiction were often written as helpers, love interests, or victims whose main job was to react emotionally while men made decisions. Ripley changed that pattern without speeches or slogans. She was calm under pressure, practical when others panicked, and willing to question authority when it failed her. Weaver later revealed that this quiet strength made studio executives nervous because it challenged the belief that audiences needed a male hero to stay engaged. Even after the success of Alien and Aliens, she said she constantly had to defend Ripley's intelligence and independence in meetings where executives suggested making her more likable, which usually meant softer, prettier, or romantically attached. Weaver refused those changes because she believed Ripley's power came from realism, not fantasy. Ripley was not fearless. She was afraid, tired, and grieving, but she acted anyway. Weaver said that honesty was what made the character last, even when studios failed to understand at the time. Weaver also reflected on how fame changed her life in unexpected ways after Alien. She was suddenly recognized everywhere, yet she did not feel powerful or protected. Instead, she felt more exposed. She admitted that Hollywood success came with invisible pressure, especially for women who did not fit the industry's preferred image. At 6 feet tall, with a deep voice and serious presence. Weaver said she was often told she was wrong for roles before she even auditioned. Casting directors worried she made male actors look small or weak, and some asked if she would wear flats or lower her posture. She learned to stand her ground, literally and figuratively, rather than shrinking herself. She chose roles that embraced her strength. This decision cost her opportunities, but it also gave her control. She said she would rather be remembered for a few honest performances than for dozens of forgettable ones made by compromise. This mindset shaped her entire career and is one of the reasons her filmography feels intentional rather than accidental. Motherhood also changed how Weaver saw Ripley in Alien. After becoming a mother herself, she understood Ripley's bond with Newt in Aliens on a deeper level. She admitted that some scenes became harder to watch as she aged, especially those involving loss and sacrifice. This emotional growth strengthened her belief that Ripley's story needed an ending. Weaver explained that endless sequels cheapen emotion because grief only matters when it has consequences. When Ripley died in Alien 3, Weaver saw it as an act of respect, even if the execution was imperfect. She revealed that she did not want Ripley to become a superhero who could never be hurt or changed. To her, that would have betrayed the character's humanity. This philosophy later influenced her refusal to return in crossovers or reboots, even when studios offered enormous paychecks. Weaver said that money fades quickly, but meaning lasts as Hollywood entered a new era of remakes and nostalgia-driven franchises. Sigourney Weaver became increasingly cautious about returning to old roles. She noticed how legacy characters were often brought back not to grow, but to remind audiences of better times. While she appreciated fan love, she refused to let Ripley become a symbol without substance. Weaver said that if Ripley ever returned, it would need to reflect the world honestly, not hide behind spectacle. This is why she responded positively to Alien, Isolation. The game focused on fear, isolation, and survival, the same emotions that made the original Alien powerful. Weaver felt it respected Ripley's spirit, without turning her into a product. She praised the developers for understanding that Alien was never about explosions, but about vulnerability and intelligence under pressure. In her later years, Weaver also became more reflective about her place in film history. She acknowledged that younger audiences now take strong female leads for granted, but she gently reminded them that it was not always this way. Roles like Ripley were once considered risky, strange, or even box office poison. Weaver expressed pride not in being first, but in being honest. She said she never tried to represent all women. She simply tried to play one truthfully. That truth resonated because it did not beg for approval. Looking back, Weaver said she was grateful for rejection, failure, and struggle because it taught her resilience before fame arrived. Without those lessons, she believes success might have broken her instead of strengthening her. Now, at 75, Sigourney Weaver does not speak with bitterness, but with clarity. She understands that Hollywood is a machine driven by fear and money, but she also believes artists can survive it by choosing integrity over approval. Her truth about Alien is not hidden in scandals or secret files. It lives in the quiet battles she fought behind closed doors, the roles she protected, and the moments she walked away when staying would have been easier. Ripley was never just a character. She was a test, and Sigourney Weaver passed it by refusing to let fear write her story. As the years went by, Sigourney Weaver also began to understand how deeply Alien had affected audiences far beyond Hollywood, something she never expected when she first stepped onto that dark spaceship set in 1978. She revealed that fans often told her Ripley helped them during moments of fear, loneliness, or uncertainty in their own lives. Soldiers, doctors, single parents, survivors of abuse, and people facing illness said they found strength in watching a woman who stayed calm when everything around her fell apart. Weaver admitted that hearing these stories changed the way she viewed her own work. What once felt like just another acting job slowly revealed itself as something meaningful. Ripley was not powerful because she had weapons or special abilities, but because she trusted her judgment when others panicked. Weaver said this was a lesson she carried into her real life as well. When faced with pressure from studios, criticism from executives, or expectations to behave a certain way, she relied on the same quiet confidence Ripley showed on screen. In that sense, Alien did not just shape her career, it shaped her character. She also spoke openly about age and how Hollywood treats women as they grow older, an issue she refused to ignore. Weaver explained that many actresses are quietly pushed aside once they pass a certain age, regardless of talent or experience. Instead of fighting this reality with fear, she chose to face it honestly. She took roles that reflected aging without shame, playing women who carried history, wisdom, and scars rather than pretending youth could last forever. She said that aging gave her freedom because she no longer needed approval from casting directors or studios. This freedom allowed her to return to theater, voice acting, and experimental roles that younger versions of herself might have been afraid to try. Weaver revealed that this stage of her life felt more creative than any other because she was no longer proving herself to anyone. She was simply telling stories she believed in. Weaver also addressed the idea that Alien succeeded only because it was violent or shocking, something she strongly disagreed with. She explained that fear alone never lasts. What made Alien timeless was its atmosphere of uncertainty and isolation. The crew was trapped, underpaid, ignored by a corporation that viewed them as replaceable, and slowly hunted by something they did not understand. Weaver said this reflected real-world anxiety about work, power, and control, especially for women and working-class people. Ripley's conflict was not just with the creature, but with a system that valued profit over human life. This theme, she believed, was why Alien aged so well. As corporations grew larger and more distant, audiences related even more to Ripley's refusal to follow orders that put lives at risk. Weaver said that truth was never advertised, but it was always there beneath the surface. Another truth Weaver revealed later in life was how often she felt alone during the height of her fame. Despite success, awards, and public praise, she said she rarely felt understood by the industry. Meetings were filled with people who saw her as a brand rather than a person. Scripts arrived that misunderstood her completely, offering roles that felt empty or dishonest. She turned many of them down, even when friends warned her she was being too picky. Weaver said loneliness was the price of independence, but it was a price she was willing to pay. She believed compromise might bring comfort, but it would cost her identity. This belief separated her from many of her peers, and is one reason her career never followed a predictable path. As she reflected on the future of Alien, Weaver made it clear she did not feel ownership over the franchise, but she felt responsibility toward the character. She said Ripley belonged to audiences now, but her spirit needed protection. She expressed hope that future filmmakers would understand what made the story work. Not louder action or bigger monsters, but tension, intelligence, and emotional truth. Weaver believed that fear works best when it is quiet and personal, not explosive and flashy. This philosophy explained why she never chased sequels or demanded control. She trusted that if Alien was meant to survive, it would do so by respecting its roots rather than repeating its surface elements to AT-75. Sigourney Weaver stands as a rare example of longevity built on principle rather than popularity. She never became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood, but she became something more lasting, a symbol of quiet resistance. Her truth about Alien is not dramatic or shocking. It is simple. The film worked because it respected its audience. Ripley worked because she respected herself. And Sigourney Weaver endured because she refused to betray either. In an industry built on fear of failure, she chose courage again and again, even when no one was watching. That choice, more than any role, is what made her unforgettable. As Sigourney Weaver looked back on her long relationship with Alien, she began to speak more openly about fear, not the kind created by monsters, but the fear that quietly controls creative industries. She explained that the real enemy on the set was often not the xenomorph, but uncertainty. Studios feared losing money, executives feared being blamed, and artists feared being replaced. Weaver said this fear shaped many decisions that damaged the franchise, especially during Alien 3. She recalled moments where powerful ideas were removed simply because they felt unfamiliar. Religious symbolism, quiet grief, and moral ambiguity were considered too risky. Weaver later said that these were exactly the elements that could have made the film timeless. Instead, fear led to compromise, and compromise led to confusion. This realization changed how she approached every project afterward. She no longer asked whether something would succeed financially, but whether it would still matter years later. That question became her guide, and is why her later choices feel deliberate rather than desperate. She also reflected on how Alien reshaped the meaning of heroism. Before Ripley, heroes were often loud, confident, and physically dominant. Ripley was different. She observed, waited, and acted only when necessary. Weaver said this style of strength was rarely celebrated, especially in women. Yet audiences responded to it because it felt honest. Ripley survived not because she wanted glory, but because she refused to surrender. Weaver admitted that this quiet determination mirrored her own personality. She was never comfortable with celebrity culture or public performance off-screen. She preferred preparation over attention and substance over spectacle. This alignment between actor and character created something rare: authenticity. Weaver believes audiences can sense authenticity instinctively, even when they cannot explain it. As discussions around representation grew louder in Hollywood, Weaver resisted the idea that Ripley needed to be labeled or explained. She said Ripley was not written as a symbol, and that was her strength. The character existed without apology or justification. Weaver worried that modern storytelling sometimes tried too hard to announce its intentions, forgetting that audiences connect more deeply through experience than instruction. Alien allowed viewers to feel fear, isolation, and courage rather than being told what to think. That subtlety, she believed, is what allowed the film to reach people across cultures, languages, and generations. Weaver said that when stories trust their audience, they become more powerful, not less. Weaver also spoke about failure, something she believed Hollywood misunderstood. She said failure was treated like a disease, something to hide or erase, but in reality it was essential to growth. Alien 3 felt like a failure when it was released, and she admitted that criticism hurt deeply at the time. Yet years later, she saw how the film challenged expectations and refused comfort. That refusal, she said, was valuable even if it was unpopular. Weaver explained that artists often learn more from projects that struggle than from those that succeed easily. Failure forces honesty. It reveals what truly matters and what does not. This perspective helped her let go of resentment and view her career as a complete story rather than a collection of victories and losses. In her later interviews, Weaver also addressed the idea of control. She admitted that she never fully controlled Alien, no matter how powerful she became. Studios always held the final word. What she could control was her participation. She could choose when to step forward and when to step away. Walking away, she said, was often misunderstood as arrogance or fear, but it was neither. It was self-respect. She encouraged younger actors, especially women, to understand the difference between opportunity and obligation. Not every offer deserves acceptance, and not every door needs to be opened. Weaver believed that saying no created space for better work and a healthier relationship with creativity. As the cultural meaning of Alien continued to grow, Weaver observed something unexpected. The film became less about science fiction and more about survival in an uncaring system. Younger viewers connected Ripley's struggle to modern anxieties: corporate control, loss of autonomy, and the fear of being treated as disposable. Weaver said this interpretation made her proud, because it proved the story was alive. It continued to evolve without needing to be rewritten. That, she believed, was the mark of true storytelling. When a story adapts inside the minds of its audience, it does not need constant revival. The stage of her life. Sigourney Weaver no longer felt the need to defend Alien or explain her choices. The work spoke for itself. She had nothing left to prove and nothing left to protect except her peace. Looking back, she said the truth about Alien was simple and almost quiet. It succeeded because it respected fear without celebrating violence, strength without cruelty, and survival without ego. It endured because it trusted a woman to lead without asking her to change who she was. And she endured because she trusted herself enough to walk away when the story was finished. In a world that demands endless continuation, that ending was her greatest act of courage. As Sigourney Weaver entered the later stage of her life, she began to see Alien not just as a film series, but as a mirror of her own journey through an industry that rarely slows down to reflect. She explained that when she was younger, she believed success meant endurance, staying visible, staying relevant, staying useful to powerful people. Over time, she realized that endurance without purpose leads to emptiness. Alien taught her that survival is not about staying alive at all costs, but about knowing when something has run its course. Ripley survived because she knew when to fight and when to escape. Weaver survived Hollywood for the same reason. She did not cling to fame or fear disappearance. Instead, she trusted that meaningful work would always find her if she remained honest with herself. This belief freed her from a panic that traps many actors in endless repetition. Weaver also reflected on the silence surrounding women's struggles in film during the early years of her career. She said that in the late 1970s and 1980s, there was no language for discussing power imbalance, creative control, or emotional exhaustion. Women were expected to adapt quietly or be replaced. Looking back, she admitted that she endured moments of dismissal and disrespect that she would never accept today. Yet she does not frame those years with anger. She sees them as proof of how much has changed and how much still needs to change. Weaver believes progress happens slowly, carried forward by example rather than confrontation. Ripley became such an example, not because she challenged authority loudly, but because she survived despite it. Another truth Weaver shared later in life was how carefully she protected her private world. Fame offered endless invitations, parties, and attention, but she chose distance instead. She lived in New York rather than Hollywood, raised her family away from cameras, and returned to theater whenever film culture felt overwhelming. Weaver said the separation allowed her to remain curious rather than defensive. Curiosity, she believed, is essential to creativity. When artists become trapped by their image, curiosity dies. By stepping outside the spot.